and of course, if price goes down. The VIX itself is pretty much dead this year in terms of us doing proper analysis on it. As you can see here, most of the traders out there, as I understand it, if the VIX did spike, a lot of hedging would have to go on, which would force quite a lot of selling in the market. So do maybe set an alert here above 15, just in case it happens, as that's going to be a pretty big trigger point. What about yields? Well, we saw yields go down and then up. And of course, basically speaking, this was a pretty big deal. Now, markets rallied into what you wouldn't think they could do, which is the yields would come back down to this important level, and then they would go up and the market would rally with them. You know, a big number like that, our jobs, yeah, sure, it's good for the economy theoretically, but not good for what the Fed is trying to do. So it really means higher rates for longer, and it sent treasuries down as well, which has been one of our favorites over the last week. We talked a lot about 93, 94 being a buy zone, and it got all the way to 98 plus, almost 99. And then, of course, it sold off a bit. Is this something to worry about? I don't think so yet. I still think it's pretty good. And of course, treasuries it should really be considered over the long haul. What about when we look at bonds markets? Well, bonds markets were strong then, of course, a little bit weak in terms of overall the last couple of weeks. We did have a big Friday for them though, so no real indications there. Home builders held their own. We've been talking about this possibly being distribution. They didn't really move. And the American consumer, XLY versus XLP, that was holding its own, mostly thanks to Amazon. Remember, if we keep seeing things like XLY weakening against XLP, that's not a good sign for the internals of the market. And it brings us back to this chart, which is, of course, our treasury yields versus our high yields, so our junk bonds. If we keep seeing this rise off, then that's going to show us again that market internals are starting to weaken across the board. These are all things that a swing trader or a position-based trader is going to be looking at. Of course, a scalper is going to be like, well, it doesn't matter for me just yet because I don't care. I just want instant price action. That's more for a predictor that's starting to look at the internals and saying, you know what, this is the weirdest thing that we've seen any point over the last 5 months. And of course, it was pretty much positive up until the start of January. Then some stuff started getting a little bit weird. And even since that point, the markets have really just shown that certain stocks have been picking up, not the rest of them. Let's move over to copper now. So Dr. Copper has been weakening. And you can see here, big rejection week on the weekly, not a positive sign. I'd still have alerts above 395 just in case. If that does happen, then of course, I think that copper's on an absolute tear at that point. So it's worthwhile setting the alert. But if you're looking at this chart right now, you would say that looks pretty weak after hitting that big level. The dollar index finally did hit it. So yeah, 103.80, the parroting worked. And we got there in a way that I didn't think we'd probably get there. But anyway, we did get there. And we managed to close the weekly at these points. So we can see here, this is where if the dollar is going to weaken, you would look for weakness, and we'll be watching the charts. It's worthwhile setting alerts underneath here as well for big term swing traders, because if that happens, I would say that the dollar is possibly going underneath parity. So there's some big zones coming up for it, and I think some really great trades coming forward for the dollar. But if you've held it strong, and you've held it for this bullish movement, congrats. This is one that I felt that we've talked about for, it's been a while now. So it's been all of January into Feb. So it's been a while for that trade to come through. Anyway, it's done it now. Gold. Now, this is interesting. We didn't end up closing above 2055, so we didn't get a big rally there. We came back down to the most traded zone, and we got 1, 2, 3 wicks now coming off this level. So you can see from the top down, it's testing it and finding buyers. For day traders, they're looking at that level. And we've had this zone on here for a while talking about it, but you can see it actually made a new low, but then it rallied a little bit. So day traders will be looking at market structure a lot. That big initial reaction from jobs numbers, of course, selling it through. I'd prefer it does something like this. If that happened, I'd probably be a little bit more bullish on gold. Or 2055 getting closed above would be a big deal. So some stuff to talk about this week if we get it. Oil looks pretty bad. It keeps selling off. We did unfortunately have the bias towards the short side, as we discussed. It's pretty much a classic setup in terms of what happened up here. And our aim was originally 78. If we breached through 79 with the daily close, we were going to 82 to 84. We just didn't see it. So we're back down into kind of like where we've seen a lot of trade before. But oil with that kind of weekly looks like it could have more selling to come. And that's showing you again that realistically yields actually should be turning towards the downside, because usually that's what happens with oil. Apple, you can see so close yet so far. Didn't quite hit that most traded alert zone I had. But if you did watch it and you're buying around there, you would have been pretty happy with the session because it ended up moving about 3.72 back into your favor. Now, the weekly still is pretty bad. The daily obviously shows a lot of strength and decent volume in it. So this could be a catalyst to see more markets go up and go ballistic. But yeah, Apple just bouncing off that zone. Tesla, still trapped in the area as we expect. I'd like to see a new low for Tesla. Maybe even like this. That would be pretty cool. Or this. There will be a good trade coming forward, I think, for Tesla. And at the moment, credit sellers would be pretty happy with themselves. Let's take a look at Meta now. So Meta opened at 450 plus, and then it went all the way to 486. Now, this is a pretty big move for Meta, and you can see here on the charts that it had massive volume. Now, someone did place a big trade, as we know, but we didn't see any huge selling yet. I will be watching Meta like a hawk this week, along with Amazon and possibly Nvidia, as it just approached its 12-month target. If you held it to this point and you weren't just a long-term investor just celebrating, then you're doing pretty good. Because for me, a lot of the time 600 would have been one of my targets here for this particular stock. But it just keeps driving higher and higher and higher. And if they start to see big sells, it'll bring the market with it. Let's now have a look at semiconductors. So we talked about the island reversal here, which is still in play. And of course, the markets have rallied forward. Now, again, Nvidia has been saving the semiconductor market because underneath is quite bad. And you can see here that we're coming back. We still have the possibility of selling and island reversal at the TP zone. So still technically a weak market internal there. HSI, which is the Hang Seng Index, you can see here still holding up above. If you think it's something like a CQQQ, that's been absolutely getting flogged. And as we already saw with the stats before, we're probably in capitulation now. So the stats are starting to turn into the more positive side. And we'll be watching very closely around Chinese New Year, which I think is a week away, what's going on with that market. Now let's go to the US 2K. So US 2K has literally two possibilities. Buyers are here, and we've speculated sellers sit around 1985. So there's both a buy and sell case going on in this market right now from the internals underneath. You can also see if you have a look, that's a big doji with 2 weak rejections up here. So it kind of points to me as maybe being a little bit more bearish from the Russell 2K side. But yeah, very interesting point there. And you can make a case for both of those levels. If you're long at those zones, I wouldn't blame you. Another island reversal for the Qs, which of course was here. And then we move down and then we move back up. Now to stop a freight train can sometimes take a whack off. This was actually a slightly higher high, I believe. But overall, yeah, still a island reversal, still an interesting zone for it. And as always, we're being led more by the S&P than anything else. So let's take a look at the S&P. Comes up, hits 49.75, then sells a little bit. Now, this was also, as we reported before, a big Fibonacci zone. So basically, as the SPX said, 49.75 was an SPX 1618 extension. So this is your normal TP zone for some people that have been rallying it up. We know where our big swing trade comes in terms of actually seeing big market weakness, which is 48.50. You might want to set an alert around 4900 this week. If we do close underneath that, it's probably a decent sign of weakness as well. We've got multiple highs here that are very interesting as well in terms of the way the market has broken. And of course, 5K is going to be a huge watch level. Giant amounts of options, huge amounts of opportunity for retail traders and everybody else that's going to be on the small timeframes there, with reactions around here and market structure being such an important zone. But we did get very close. And oftentimes when you're approaching a big round number, and we'll do a special on this in our next video, a big round number, if we haven't already hit it, a big round number often does bring with it some I would say some interesting reactions. So it's not very often you hit a big Z level for the first time. I mean, the last time we hit a big level was here. And you might notice, I'll just quickly put it there, that we got really close, 39.66, then we sold off. Then we got to 39.87, then we sold off. So it's pretty normal for a big roundy to kind of find these types of levels. You can see here 3,000, the first ever hit, we ended up selling off. So it's not uncommon. It's something that we will be looking at, and this is a huge zone for the markets. We also have a special coming up on healthcare soon, so make sure to sub for that if you're interested. Bitcoin, boring coin. That's what we talk at the moment. Yeah, if you're in the long side, you're probably still happy. If you're not underneath this level, you're not really going to be thinking about swing trades, and shorters are still short from literally this zone. You can see how it's defending it, which is the price of around 43.5. So if it does break through this high being 44, we're probably moving back up to 46, 47. So a lot of stuff going on there on the charts. Week ahead, not as much as you might think in terms of overall actual big news. We've got the RBA cash statements. We've got ISM services PMI, and that's really the main stuff. So it's going to be allowed to go with the earnings. And of course, that means you should subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed what you saw so far and you want to go around with even more info coming out this week. And we have our free VIP weekly newsletter as well, guys. So join us in another week of exploration of the markets. We're about to witness potentially history, but do remember when we approach the big zone, often we have seen a little bit of selling before. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.